Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Giga, a late 90s arcade classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Published by Konami and developed by Takumi Corporation, Giga released to arcades in 1999. It would see release on the Dreamcast in the same year. Now fast forward to 2021, and this title was included as part of Capcom's Arcade Stadium, which was originally released on the Nintendo Switch and then saw release on the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the PC later in the same year. So I gotta say, this is one of the titles that I feel is the standout in the whole Capcom Arcade Stadium, but it's a suite of software that I want to recommend, as I think it's actually a pretty incredible, well, deal for what you're getting, especially if you're looking for shoot 'em ups, but the whole presentation itself is something that I love. So before we dive into the gameplay itself, let's go over a little bit what the Capcom Arcade Stadium is. So initially, you'll download what's is basically just like a base package that actually does come with one free title, and that title itself is pretty awesome, as that is 1943, the Battle of Midway. It's a really great title to have as a free introduction to the whole Capcom Arcade Stadium. Then there are 3 packs you can buy, which will add games of different eras. So the first pack will include the earlier stuff, so if you've that Capcom released to the arcades. Though if you've downloaded their previous arcade arena that they'd released back in the PlayStation 3 era, then most of those titles are included there. But the 2 newer eras have stuff that are new to see, such as Final Fight 1942, and it just goes on and on. And we can go and sort by different games here, so you can set favorites. It's got different genres, so you've got actions, and the one that we're interested in, the shooter genre. And this whole package, out of all the games it has, there are 15 shoot 'em ups. So even with the 3 packs being $15 a piece, you're still getting a great deal, basically $3 a shoot 'em up if you were to buy them all. And the selection here is excellent. So you've got 19XX, Giga 1944, and it just goes on and on. Some of the earlier ones may not have as high a quality as the Capcom's later releases, but they're definitely there. And to go and show off the whole platform, I decided to start with Giga. So getting back to Giga, when we start a title, we're taken to this screen here. So you can kind of play it like it were an arcade, like a cabinet, and once you start the game, you've got these display settings. So we can adjust our frame so we can have it look 3D. The problem here is that you're actually playing the game with this as your screen. So if it had a VR setup, that would be worth it, but otherwise it's not great. But one thing that is neat is you can change the look of the cabinet. So you can do an upright, you can do this weird interesting status one, the mini cute, and the impress, basically your standard Japanese candy cap. But for my purposes, it's best to see the full frames of the game, so we set it to the 2D, and out of all the various border backgrounds, Cow is definitely the best. You've got some other options you can change here, including putting on filters. Since this is the Switch, you can actually change the orientation, especially when it's in handheld mode. That is actually quite neat. In addition to this, it is possible to change some of the settings in the game. So you can change the difficulty level. In this case, we go all the way from 1 all the way up to 8. So let's set that at 2. Starting life, starting bombs. You can even change the game speed, but that's something that we can do in-game. And as well as the attract mode, so that's basically your demo sound. With all that set, let's dive into the title itself. Starting the game, if you have the game set into the 3D mode and you go to insert the coin, it has this neat little animation where it has a coin rotating above the coin slot and you actually put it in. Just a neat little feature. We don't see that in this screen though. So with a few coins pressed in, we're actually going to show this game off with 2-player mode, and I'll get to why in just a moment. So starting the game with 1 player, we get to select which player we choose. So there's 4 characters in the arcade version. So for today, we're going to go with Ruby and Aisha. Just kind of they complement each other pretty well. Run button there. Ruby has a really powerful straight shot. Aisha's is a homing missile. The other characters, you've got Stuck, who has this powerful bomb attack, but I don't feel like it's powerful enough for how difficult it is to use. And Shinosuke has a really nice spread, but so between but having the homing, we kind of cover that. So one of the things that's really fun about playing the game two-player is each combination of characters is going to have their own unique story. So you actually end up into having all the players, or all the characters rather, have their own story. That's 4 stories total, plus the 12 different combinations you can have their own story for 16 stories total. It's also possible to have a couple different endings for every single one of those story paths, basically the 1 CC clear versus normal clear, or at least 1 CC to the end of the game. I'm honestly not certain if it requires you to beat the game 1 CC to still get the better ending once you've reached the final stage, the 7th stage. Another thing that's pretty interesting about the game itself is, depending on which character you pick, your path through the game will be different. So that's enough about the story. Let's talk a little bit about the mechanics. So mechanic-wise, for the era, I kind of feel like there's a beautiful simplicity to Giga. So the game primarily revolves around one mechanic they added, and that's the reflect barrier. You also have a shot, which can be powered up 3 times, and bombs, so pretty standard fare there. But the reflect barrier is the interesting part. So take note, in the bottom left and right of the screen, you have meters that are currently blinking OK. So if we activate the reflect barrier, it will charge up that meter, and it does take just a second, and then after the attack rather, it takes a second to cool down, then it'll go back to OK. While that barrier is active, we actually have some really good enemies to show that off coming up. It will reflect any enemy shots that we encounter back at the enemy. They hit the enemy, they also produce these medals, which we can collect for some really big point values. And in that time frame where you're reflecting bullets, you're momentarily invulnerable. So for this one being kind of a bullet hell, there's a lot of times where they're expecting you to use that particular mechanic to survive. In addition to that, we also have the awesome bombs, and one thing I do appreciate about this game is every single character does have their own type of bomb. So for Ruby, for example, and the ship Carmine, it's kind of that like firestorm, whereas for Aisha, it's this neat ice attack that kind of freezes the entire screen. Then for Shinosuke, it's a lightning attack, and it's kind of like a gravity bomb for Stuck. I'm not really 100% sure exactly what it's supposed to be, but that's kind of the idea of what's going on there. So just about made it to the end of the first stage, a battleship in lava. So it gives us a decent chance to talk a little bit about the story of the game itself. So basically this takes place in like a world post-World War II, where we've got yet another world war going on. And it kind of hints that there's this mysterious power that's kind of behind all this medallion created by the gods, and that's what our characters are out to do, is to destroy this medallion created by the gods. So against the bosses, that's a great time to really put to use your barriers, and especially timed with bombs. If you've got your timing just about right, you can use your reflect barrier and then bomb and then use your reflect barrier, because the bomb will kind of cover for the time you need to recover your reflect barrier, just effectively keeping yourself invulnerable. Or if you're playing 2-player, you can kind of just go to town on the boss with the bombs, blow up that medallion in the middle of the ship, and bam! On to the next stage. But this is a great time to talk about one of the things I think is ridiculous about this game, and look at those score totals. This is not something that's unique to just Giga. Takumi Corporation, with their other titles, so of course the later Giga, and in addition to that, Mars Matrix, had insane point totals, just going like incredible like trillion point scores. Even for the era, it was just a little bit on the silly side. So you could of course chop off some zeros there, and you'd have probably a more accurate calculation of what the score should be. But that's what they wanted to go with, so you can definitely appreciate that. And that is basically Giga Wing served up for your enjoyment. As I said, it's a game that's like really like simple for its mechanics, and yet it's an incredibly satisfying mechanic to master. Just getting the timing right of when you want to activate your reflect barrier, when you want to use the bombs, really feels good. As far as the minus flavors are concerned, I don't really have much for this one, as I just really enjoy the whole package that the game presents, but it is a little weak on the sound design element, so that is one thing that could potentially be said as a negative. But the stage design is all incredibly solid as far as like plus flavors are concerned. The reflect barrier mechanic is really just an awesome idea and great thing to practice. It's like with some of these enemies here, you can just see how effective and fun it is to use, because the game designers knew what they had developed, so the bullet patterns that the enemies throw at you are ones that at the same time as being effective, they're also meant to be thrown back at the enemy, and it's just a fun mechanic that way. Also, the whole Capcom arcade stadium is a really solid package. So in addition to the just base emulation, as I mentioned, we have some features to actually mess with some of the timing. So if we were crazy, we could actually speed up the game and make everything faster. For a shoot 'em up, that's not really going to end well in most situations. But at the same time, you can also slow things down, or just have it normal. And if you happen to make mistakes, this game also has a rewind feature, so you can back things up. That's one way you can aim for that 1 CC clear to see all the endings that this game has to offer. And really, that's kind of where I feel, even more so than the mechanics, that's one of the things where I feel this game has the strength and the replayability, is playing through the game as all the different characters. Because the fighters do have some different feels to them as far as how you're controlling your ship. In addition to that, just the desire to see the various silly stories that they happen to go and throw in there. And when you're playing two-player, the interaction between the characters, I think, really makes this game. So if this is one that you haven't tried now, or you haven't tried the Capcom Arcade Stadium, then I definitely recommend at least downloading the shell and giving a rundown of 1943 and seeing what you think. But once again, as I was saying, the packs are an excellent price for what you're getting in them, as there's several shoot 'em ups in each, usually about $3-4 average per pack. So definitely a strong recommend from me. Alright, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll catch you next time.